Good evening, everyone. It's now 6:30 p.m. and I'll declare this agenda briefing forum is open. I'd like to begin with an acknowledgement of country and invite Councillor Devereux to read the acknowledgement for us, please.
Nan Jerapin Wajak Nunga Bujak Yakin Nija Bilya Barduk. I'm honoured to be standing on Wajak Nunga country on the banks of the Swan River. Nan Kadich Nunga Mort Ken Karak Nija Wajak Nunga Buja. Nan Kadich Nija Nunga Birdia. Kura Yeye Border Balapan Mordich Nunga Kardajan Mort Where Buja Yeye. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and respect past, present and emerging leaders, their continuing cultural heritage, beliefs and relationship with the land, which continues to be important today. Nan Yunka Balapan Nunga Burdia Where Mort Nija Buja. I thank them for the contribution made to life in the town of Victoria Park and to this region.
Thanks, Councillor Devereux. We'll move on to item 4 of the agenda, which is announcements from the presiding member. 4.1 is the purpose of the agenda briefing forum. The purpose of this forum is to provide an opportunity for elected members to ask questions and obtain additional information on officer reports in the draft Ordinary Council meeting agenda. It's not a decision-making forum, nor is it open for debate. Members of the public that may be directly affected by an item on the agenda can make presentations, deputation statements and ask questions prior to the matter being formally considered by Council at the next Ordinary Council meeting. 4.2, notice of recording and live streaming. All participation in the briefing forum will be audio recorded and live streamed on the town's website. The live stream will be archived and made available on the town's website after the meeting. 4.3, conduct of meeting. All those in attendance are expected to extend due courtesy and respect to the meeting by refraining from making any adverse or defamatory remarks regarding council, the staff or any elected member. No one shall create a disturbance at a meeting by interrupting or interfering with the proceedings through expressing approval or dissent, by conversing or by any other means. All questions and statements made by members of the public are not to personalise any elected member or member of staff. Questions and statements are to be directed to the presiding member, who may choose to call upon an officer of the town or another elected member to assist with responses. 4.4, public participation time. Excuse me. There is an opportunity to ask questions and make statements at the beginning and end of the meeting related to agenda items only. The opportunity to ask questions and make statements at the end of the meeting is limited to those members of the public who did not participate in the first public participation time at this meeting. Public participation time will be held for a maximum of 30 minutes. Any additional time must be by agreement from the meeting and will be in 5-minute increments. As per our usual practice, there's a limit of 3 questions per person and 2 minutes allocated to the making of statements. If there are insufficient members of the public gallery who wish to ask questions or make statements, we can be more generous with the number of questions and the amount of time for statements, subject to fairness and equity for all. 4.5, questions taken on notice. Responses to questions taken on notice that relate to an agenda item will be presented in the officer report for the Ordinary Council meeting agenda under the heading of further consideration. Item 5 is attendance. We have all elected members in attendance, save for an apology from Councillor Anderson. We also have a number of members of the town staff present, led by the Acting CEO, Mr Doy. Item 6 is declarations of interest. Mr Acting CEO, do we have any declarations of interest, please?
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. We do have one declaration of interest with regards to item 12.1. It's from you, Mayor Karen Vernon. The interest is an impartiality interest. The reason: 3 of the applicants for grants, Victoria Park Community Centre, Curate Arts Incorporated and Up Close and Local, are known to me through attendance at their events or meetings with their management.
Thank you, Mr Doy. Are there any other declarations of interest that elected members need to make? We'll go to you, Councillor Miles, first, and then Councillor Cruiser.
So I did submit this online, but probably missed the deadline. So 12.1, arts season grow-up funding. Several members of the board and members of staff from the Vic Park Community Centre are known to me.
Thank you. Councillor Cruiser.
This has also been submitted online for the same item that several of the applicants, either as individuals or as members of the organisation, are known to me.
Deputy Mayor Ife.
Yes, sorry. Same item, 12.1. A number of the applicants are known to me and I'll submit that now.
Any others? Councillor Devereux.
Same 12.1, I'll submit that, but also several of the applicants and organisations are known to me.
Thank you. Anyone else who needs to make a declaration? All right, thank you. We'll move on now to item 7, which is public participation time, which I'll open at 6:36 p.m. I have one person who's indicated they wish to ask questions about item 13.7 on the agenda. Ms Stockman, please come forward, state your name and suburb, please.
My name is Ojani Stockman from Left Lane. I've got, I think, 2 questions in relation to Rutland Avenue. I've been able to read the report before tonight's meeting, and the recommendations are just noting for council. So my first question is, what's the process and timeline for a decision to be made on the 2 options? My second question is, along the same lines, what's the quickest that the budget for the recommended option or chosen option can be approved?
Direct those questions to Mr Lappin.
Through the chair, I'll take that on notice.
All right, so we'll need to take both of those questions on notice. What I can say in relation to the second part of your question, Ms Stockman, is once council does make a decision on what it considers is the best way forward, if that were to include the taking of a specific action, such as the installation of speed bumps, call them for want of a better expression, then the quickest options for that are budget variations can be made at every ordinary council meeting once a month. So we would do them as part of the adoption of the financial activity statements for the month, where we look to make an adjustment to allocate money. Obviously, it takes a report for that to say where the money would come from if it's unbudgeted expenditure. So we do have budgets that allow for certain things to be done, and some of those budgets will have enough in them that will allow certain things to occur, and other budgets will not have any wriggle room, in which case we then need to look at taking some funds from either a reserve or reallocating some funds from another particular budget item that we have that might be identified, for example, as likely to be underspent in the course of the financial year before FY25. So the quickest option would be a budget variation. There is always a mid-year budget review, which is something we're required to do under legislation, and we generally try to do our budget reviews between February and March. Mr Old, that would be the right time that we normally work for a mid-year budget review. The timing of it depends on what the town staff are bringing forward. So sometimes the mid-year budget review is done in the first meeting for 2025 in February, in which case the details of that will be in the agenda briefing forum that is issued in usually the last week of January, in readiness for the agenda briefing forum held on the first Tuesday of February. So that is, I guess, the generalities. If something is considered urgent, as in extreme urgency under our meeting procedures, local or a special council meeting can be held for the purposes of dealing with any business that we need to that is urgent. So I know that doesn't give you very set amounts of time, but we come back in 2 weeks' time for ordinary council meeting. And at this stage, I can't tell you in advance because I don't know what council will debate or consider should be done in response to the officer's recommendation. But clearly tonight you might hear questions from other elected members about this item that might indicate to you something about that. So apart from that, I will formally take your questions on notice since the officer concerned has asked for that to be the case, and that way, when the agenda is issued for ordinary council meeting, which will be in a week and a bit's time, In the further consideration heading at the bottom of item 13.7, answers to your questions will appear in the agenda so that you'll be able to see what is the fulsome answer to your questions then. Did you have any other questions that you wanted to ask, given that we don't appear to have any other members of the public gallery present? So more than happy if you've got other questions you'd like to ask. This is a good chance for you to do that.
Maybe a follow-up question from that. So listening to your response, is there an opportunity to, because if I understand correctly, at an OCM you can actually make a decision on the budget if it's a variation. So does that mean that one of the options would be that it's considered that the OCM coming up?
By my calculation, in theory, yes. So if someone was to propose that to be the case, noting, of course, what the officers have said, and they've indicated that it's proposed to be done in the mid-year budget review, which will occur in 2025, but in the first part of 2025. If someone were to be proposing something to be done sooner than that in terms of a budget allocation, then certainly there's going to need to be questions asked by elected members of the administration about whether that could occur and how it would occur, like, for example, where the money would come from, but also, perhaps more importantly, what works would need to be done in order to achieve the outcome. So in other words, if there was a budget allocation for it, how quickly could the works be done? Will there be preparatory steps? Will there need to be going out to the market to get quotes for products, availability of staff to do the work, that sort of thing. So if someone was going to propose that, I would expect as an elected member they would seek to get information about that ahead of the December meeting. Because at the moment that isn't what the officers are recommending. So I take it they've got good reasons for that at this point in time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else?
Statement? No questions?
Yeah, no, public participation time, we meld them together so you can go straight into a statement anytime you want to. It's all fine.
Okay. Listen, I haven't got anything prepared, and even if I did, my reading glasses are at home. So over the last 10 years, that's one thing that when you get older, you lose it. So unfortunately, that's how long this has been going on for. I've read the report with great interest, and I actually don't really mind which option to proceed with. I think for me it's really important something's get done, and the sooner the better. It's very clear that there's a very long-term history. I find it quite shocking that, 85% of cars speed with over 10 kilometres an hour. And it's very obvious when I walk along Rutland, every time a car comes towards us, we often say, too fast, too fast, too fast. So I think it's a good report, provides a very good summary of the history and how we can move forward. My real hope is that we can now see action quickly, which is why I've been asking the questions around how we can now speed this up. Because when you sit at this end, often it's another report, another 2 months, mid-term budget review. I do calculating in my head, I go, okay, there's another 2 to 3 months. By the time we make a decision, we're middle of 2025. Then it'll take indication 8 weeks. No doubt it'll be longer. So, by the time we finally see some action then, probably no surprise, maybe I'm a bit pessimistic here, will be another year. And I really, really hope that this council is thinking about that seriously with this report on the table now, how that can be sped up. I have to table my apologies. I would love to come to the December OCM to see how this is progressing, but I'm on holidays and not in Perth. So, I really hope that in my absence I can come back from holidays and see some very positive and clear action. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Stockman. Noting that if you're in a place where there's an internet connection, you're welcome to look on the live streaming and you'll be able to see what happens yourself. All right, thank you. Are there any other questions or statements for public participation time from members of the public gallery? No? All right. I'll close public participation time at 6:45 p.m. Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Stockman, for coming along. We do understand and appreciate your deep interest in this. So we have a good report, and as I say, there may very well be some questions coming up from elected members shortly. So item 8 of our agenda is presentations. We have none. Deputations is item 9. We have none of those tonight. Item 10 is method for dealing with agenda business. So questions from elected members. I'm going to read out the item numbers for which we've indicated there were questions. If you could all listen, please, carefully. If there's an item that you asked for questions about and you no longer wish to ask your questions, please let me know. And if there's an item number in the agenda that is not on my list, you would like it included, please let me know that too, because as per our usual practice, we'll only be dealing with those items on the agenda for which notice has been given of questions. So first is 13.1, Strategic Waste Management Plan, 13.2, TVP 2423, General Building Maintenance and Roof Repairs. I can advise that although I submitted a question about this, it's been answered and I don't wish to pursue it. Is there anyone who wishes 13.2, General Building, to remain on? Councillor Hamer, all right, that's fine. 13.4, 34 Goddard Street, proposed lease with Amplitel. 13.5, current works required for the Lathlane Park Grandstand. 13.6, Claude Street, Burswood, request to advertise revised proposed closure of a portion of road reserve. 13.7, Rutland Avenue, Lathlane traffic calming. 13.8, TVP 2426, Edward Millen Park project tender. 13.9, TVP 2417, supply and lay asphalt services. I can advise that I asked a general question about this item. I've had an answer and I don't wish to ask it tonight. Is there anyone else who would like 13.9 to remain in the list for questions? No, not seeing any indication. So 13.9 comes out. 14.2, financial statement for October 2024. 15.1, quarter 1 audit update report, July to September 2024. And 15.2, strategic risk register review. Are there any item numbers, firstly, that people would like to have added in? Councillor Minson.
Mine were to take out if 14.2, 15.1 and 15.2, the answers
All
are
right, so
proceed
you'd
as
like to take those out. Is there anyone here who wanted to ask questions about those items so that they'll remain in? No? All right, thank you. All good. All right, anybody else? An item that they wanted to have taken out or an item that they wanted to have included? All right, so there being no further items, we'll be going through, as it turns out, 13.1 through to 13.8 with the exception of 13.3. So we'll go first now to item 13, which is the Chief Operations Officer reports, and 13.1, Strategic Waste Management Plan. Councillor Devereux, I've got an indication that you've got some questions that you wish to ask about this item. Is that right?
Yes.
If you'd like to proceed with those when you're ready.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. I won't go through all the questions, but there were some questions where I had a bit of a follow-up that I might like to make, so I just will focus on those ones. The first one is in relation to the waste-to-energy plants, and the question was about the ongoing problems related to debt and other legal issues with both the Rockingham and Kwinana waste-to-energy plants, and if, as a result of those queries, the town has considered ways to increase its budget for other measures to reduce waste or focus more strongly on what it is doing to reduce waste.
All right, thank you. I'm going to direct those questions to Mr. Wong, the Manager of Assets and Environment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The town is further expanding its waste education initiatives this financial year. There has been an increase in budget. Thank you, Council, for this work this financial year. And also, the town is in discussions with potential partners to investigate the feasibility of further initiatives such as tip shops and repair shops. In addition, we are also holding discussions with other local government officers, including those from the Mindarie Regional Council, regarding the other potential alternatives to waste-to-energy treatment. But at this stage, waste to energy treatment is still the only solution to help the town to achieve the state government targets by 2025. Thank you.
I would say, Mr Wong, the only other option being FOGO, which can also result in diversion of our waste from landfill, which is bubbling along. But Councillor Devereux, you might have some questions about that too.
Thank you. So just maybe a follow-up question to ask if there's a concern about the, given one of the waste-to-energy plants has just gone into receivership, is the town concerned about when the plants will come on stream and how certain that is?
Mr Wong?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Officers had some concerns, but after discussions with Mindarie Regional Council, we are aware that both facilities have actually been completed. They're just going through some final stages of commissioning. We understand that there is some legal issues which are being progressed at the moment, and there is strong interest from the industry to continue to operate both facilities. At this stage, we are not aware of how ultimately the East Rockingham facility will be operated by which company. We are not sure about that yet, but there's a strong indication that the facility will continue to be fully commissioned for operation. My estimate is by 2025 next year, that facility will be in operation. In the meantime, if there's any delay affecting the town, we will continue to have the MRC landfill facility to send our waste to as an interim measure. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Next question was about the Verge collection tender report and the likelihood that the report would be available for the December OCM, and if it's not possible until February, what would be the ramifications of that for the service delivery of the Verge collection tender?
Mr Wong?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. If it's not if the contract is not awarded by December or January, we could see that potentially there will be less time for us to promote the requirements of the new Verge collection system without knowing which contractor will be awarded the contract. It is difficult for us to start rolling out the required messaging to the community about the potential changes to the Verge collection system. So that would be the main impact. However, we can still mitigate that by starting to preempt the various options of services that we're likely to roll out early next year. I hope I've captured the entire question. Thank you.
Thank you. So, given the emphasis on potentially having to promote a new collection system and the requirements that go with it, are you concerned that the community, if there is a change as a result of the tender result, that may be more difficult for the community to understand if it's a very quick turnaround?
Mr. Wong?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. That is one concern. However, looking at the new collection system, there is a phase at the start of the contract where we will work together with the contractor to help the community to get used to the system. So it's a relatively forgiving arrangement, especially in the first year of implementation. However, yeah, we do acknowledge that we have to make sure that the relevant information will be ready, before we roll out early next year. That means that we have to prepare for several potential options or outcomes that might eventuate as a result of the tendering process. Thank you.
So can I just confirm, so it is still possible that we may get a late report to the December OCM about the tender? That's possible, isn't it? Is that correct?
Mr. Wong?
Yep. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, that is still possible. The evaluation is in progress now. We can still get that report presented to Council in December as a late report, if we are permitted to do so. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question was in relation to the what WALGA says are effective product stewardship schemes, which it says are crucial to local government and help redistribute the responsibility for managing post-consumption products from local government and the community onto others in a product supply chain. And I don't think I see this reflected in the current plan, but I wondered whether it would be possible to see that reflected in the current waste plan.
Mr. Wong?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, we can include that specifically in the current plan, the draft plan. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. In the plan as well, there's a number of statements about hazardous waste collections, that refer to the possibility of having 2 collection times and others that reflect the existing collection periods more like 1. And so it seems to be both are stated. Can you confirm if there would definitely be at least 2 collection rounds per year? And if that's the case, if it's possible to make that explicit and consistent in the report?
Mr. Wong?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I can confirm that it will be at least twice a year of collection rounds, and we will emphasize that in the plan. Thank you.
I think I'll call it there. Thanks. I've asked some other questions, but I've received answers for those, so I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Devereux. Any other questions about this item? Councillor Miles?
So we advertised a draft strategy, and then now we have this one. But to me, this feels quite different from the draft one. Has it changed substantially? I haven't had time to actually compare the two, but it's reading this one, it feels very different to the other one, and so I wondered how much it's changed.
Mr. Wong?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A lot of the changes that we have added were a result of internal consultation within the town after the advertisement, and these are relevant changes that will impact the operations of the town. So overall, in terms of strategic outcome that we have proposed, they remain more or less the same. It's just the more strategic, the operational additions that we've added to make sure that we have alignment within the internal functions of the town. So it's more internally issues that have been added to the version that we've got, and also there is the need to track the changes that we have included in the report. Sorry. So, excuse me. No, sorry. Yeah, thanks, Paul. If you like, we can provide a copy where it shows the track changes made. We've got that in our system as well. Yeah, thank you.
And so with the changes, there's no need, I guess this is more of a general question, so there's no need then to re-advertise to the community? Like, you only need to do that once? Is that how it works?
Mr. Wong?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. As far as I'm aware, yes, we've only need to advertise it once. Thanks.
And then I notice in the report that it says discussion 11B within the strategic waste management plan. There's a list of actions. The actions are now simplified for easy referencing within Appendix 1. Where is Appendix 1? Because I couldn't find it.
Mr. Wong?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I might have to look at the attachment. Can I take that on notice, please? Yeah, thanks.
Yes, of course, we can take that on notice for sure. And if that does become evident where it is before the OCM, it'd be great if you could let elected members know so we get it clarified as to where we need to look for that. Anything further, Councillor Miles?
So I just had a couple of questions about the implementation plan as well. I was wondering with the home composting initiative, I know in the report you said it began in February 2023. I just wondered if it was possible to get like the statistics around the numbers of attendees. Thanks.
Mr. Wong? Sorry, was that one you'll need to provide?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, we do have the information, and we've actually prepared a report as well with background and history and details of the workshops that we've undertaken or delivered, and we do have the number of participants included in the report. Thank you.
So, Councillor Miles, are you seeking some information ahead of the adoption of the plan? Yep. So we'll take it on notice for the provision of that information ahead of the OCM. Councillor Miles?
And then, so I noticed in 5.5, you've put the garage sale trail and then the cloth nappies together as a single line item, which cloth nappy workshop, which I guess I was wondering how much of the $15,000 was the garage sale trail and how much was the cloth nappies, or are they combined so you run them together? It didn't seem like you'd run them together, but I just wasn't sure why they were in the same line item.
Mr. Wong?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. The cloth nappy is definitely much cheaper. I'll confirm that. I'll take that on notice and confirm that the breakdown of the cost.
All right, so
Yeah,
we'll
thank you.
take that on notice with regards to the breakdown between both those items for the garage sale and the cloth nappies program. Councillor Miles?
And then this was very specific. I was just curious. I know for 5.6 Plastic Free July, there's $5,000 to provide 600 water bottles, printed metal water bottles. And I know that this was something that was done this year for Bike Week. And I guess I was curious, given the waste strategy is about avoiding and refusing and reducing, whether there's a need with the schools, whether the kids are coming to school with single-use plastic water bottles and there's a need to buy 600 water bottles, or, yeah, I guess, is this a need, or is this... Yeah, I guess I would like to know where the need has come from for that. That's my question.
Mr. Wong?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. That can be further reviewed. There's no specific need to supply the bottles. We can replace that particular initiative with other initiatives. Thank you.
And then just, I was wondering if you could just provide, I assume probably on notice, but there's a little bit of information here about wanting to develop a sustainability hub. It says $100,000 a year, which is obviously quite a big line item. And I just wondered if there was a bit more information rather than just like a paragraph around what that might look like, or kind of how the conversations have been progressing, or if there was just anything a bit more detailed that would be helpful to be provided.
Mr. Wong?
Yep. Thank you, Madam Mayor. We will provide that information. We'll take that on notice. Thank you.
We'll take that on notice. Councillor Miles?
I think that was everything. If I have any more things, I'll email them tomorrow.
All right. Thank you. Are there any other questions on this item? I do have a question, and apologies that I didn't send it through in advance, but noting the timing at which we went out to public consultation in June, and I don't recall off the top of my head when the state government's current review of the state waste strategy also went out and commenced. I'm actually having a look now on the website, indicates it opened at the end of May and closed on the 21st of August of this year. So in light of that timing for the review by the state government, I note it's reported in our officer report that we're aware that state is reviewing it, and that's why it's suggested that if we adopt this now, it'll be up for a review soon. What is the advantage to us in adopting this plan now for the next 5 years, rather than waiting until the state concludes its review of the state waste strategy to make sure that there's nothing extra that we need to do with our proposed waste strategy? Mr. Wong?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. With the adoption now, there are immediate implementation actions that we can start delivering. A lot of them are relatively low cost, but high impact in terms of specific outcomes that we are looking at for year one of the plan. For example, the FOGO rollout proposed for 2025. However, we do have embedded in the 5-year plan that we will have ongoing review. Ongoing reviews. So the proposal is once a year, a minor review of the document, knowing that the waste industry is a fast changing one. There's a lot of moving parts, and one of the outcomes that we wanted from this plan is to have the ability to continue to review and realign the town's actions and initiatives with the relevant changes in the industry. So I think we can postpone the endorsement of this plan. There wouldn't be a major impact because we can still continue the actions that we have been delivering over the last 5-6 years. However, the general preference is that we have endorsement, preferably this year, and then we'll continue to monitor and review and revise on an ongoing basis. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Mr. Wong. Anything else? Councillor Miles?
Sorry, I just remembered. Am I right in thinking that usually with strategies, when they go out for public submission, that we get a copy of the public submissions, or is it just dependent on? I didn't finish my sentence. Yeah, is it dependent on the specific strategy? Sorry, I got distracted. Is it dependent on the specific strategy, or do we normally, get them?
It certainly is the case that there are some things that we do advertise where it's a requirement for the public submissions to make their way into the officer's report. That's certainly the case for all planning matters. But Mr. Wong, with regards to this particular plan?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We can provide the response. In general, this overall positive comments from the community. There were some questions raised about the FOGO bins, which we are still working on before the rollout in 2025. We can provide that response to you. Yeah, thank you.
All right, I think so. We'll take it on notice so that we get the provision of the submissions from the community. I think, Councillor Miles, in my recollection, there's a level of plans that we've issued in the past where after we've done public consultation, I'm thinking things like the Arts and Culture Plan, the Youth Action Plan, the officer report noted the timing, the consultation, noted the number of comments and submissions that were made, generally summarised what the extent of the issues raised were, but without actually attaching all of the submissions from the individuals, because there isn't a legislative or a policy requirement by the town that all the detailed submissions be shared. So I think my memory is that many of those types of plans, we just got the general overview, but certainly we're able to ask to see the submissions. That's what we'll do this time. Any other questions from you? No? Any other questions about this item? No? All right. We will move on from 13.1. So we'll move now to 13.2, which is TVP 2423, General Building Maintenance and Roof Repairs. Councillor Hamer, you indicated you had some questions about this item.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. Just a general question. Obviously, the prices that have been used in the report, they're obviously examples of what the work would be. So am I correct in understanding that the 3 year plus 1 year plus 1 year will give some assurity to the town of the prices they'll be paying for that work, and that won't change over that period of time?
I'm going to direct that question to Mr. Wong as well.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, that's correct. Except that we do have what we call potential, CPI-related increases inbuilt into the contract, but that's subject to the town agreeing to accept every application that they've made for such increase. Usually is calculated on a quarterly basis. If we don't agree with the increase that they've suggested, then we have the option to not continue with the contract. Thank you.
Councillor Homer?
Sure, and does that work both ways, where the applicant could cease working if the prices weren't up to their expected market in the future?
Mr. Wong?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. It is more one way in the sense that the town has the final say whether it will agree to the requested increase. There's a clause in the contract that allows the town to have the final, to provide the final approval. The contractor may request for an increase, but the town does not have to accept it, meaning that the contractor will legally have to continue to perform the works as per contract. Yeah, that's a legal position, but there are other options that we can look at if there is real concerns with price escalations to the point that the contractor is not able to effectively deliver the services. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hamer. I will actually ask a question about this item that's different to the one that I submitted before. On page 33 and 34 of the officer report, so this is not part of the confidential attachments, under the financial implications, it indicates the value of the total contract over 3 years with further extension options is expected to be around $2 million. So I'm taking it that that's the 3 years plus the 2 on top of that. Yes. Is that right? So if that's a total of 5 years, then based on the tenderer pricing that appears page 31 for the supplier prices, noting that they're based on sample trade hourly rates. If they're annual figures for each of those tenderers, how does that come out to be $2 million in total over 5 years?
Yeah,
Mr. Wong?
thank you, Madam Mayor. The estimated cost as specified on page 31, they are the bare, not the minimum cost estimated based on sample hourly rates. So the 2 million mentioned on page 33 is not as accurate, if I could say that. We'll take that on notice if that's okay.
All right, thank you. We'll take that on notice. Thanks, Mr. Wong. I think it's important to get that point cleared up. Are there any other questions on 13.2? No? All right, we'll move on to 13.4, 34 Goddard Street, proposed lease with Ampetel. I certainly sent a series of questions through about this item, and I do want to ask those questions for the record. So the first question is, attachment 13.4.1 at page 3 indicates that existing trees 4 off, I'm not sure that's supposed to be 4 of, but it says 4 off, and vegetation to be cleared to suit compound installation. Can you please advise firstly how many trees are proposed to be removed for the telco tower, Mr. Denham, our Acting Chief Operations Officer?
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. The number of trees proposed to be removed for the telco tower is 4.
Thank you. My next question is, what is the species, height and condition of each of those trees, please, Mr. Denham?
It's a Eucalyptus tottiana, 2.2 metres high, good health and good structure. A Eucalyptus victrix, which is 4.3 metres in height, good health and fair structure. Another tree, also a Eucalyptus victrix, 4.3 metres, again, same details, good health and fair structure. And then another Eucalyptus victrix, 4.8 metres high, same details, good health and fair structure. Thank you.
Thank you. The officer report refers to the Helliwell value for these trees. What is the current Helliwell value of the trees that are proposed to be removed, Mr. Denham?
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. The 4 trees have a Helliwell value of $8,962.68 GST exempt, and this is updated to reflect the most recent plans from the applicant. Replacement tree planting at the same site or elsewhere and 3 years maintenance is costed at $2,043.76 excluding GST, plus a further amount of $1,375.26 excluding GST if the town undertakes the tree removals itself. The cost of tree pruning works for site access is unknown at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have 2 follow-up questions based on that answer. The first one is, in what circumstances would the town not be the one to undertake the tree removal, assuming council were to approve this proposal? Mr. Denham?
Mayor Vernon, we would negotiate that with the applicant depending on the circumstances known at the time, and either we would require the applicant to do the tree pruning itself to our satisfaction, or we would require them to pay the cost of it.
Thanks, Mr. Denham. That actually anticipated my follow-up question, so I won't ask that one, but I'll go back to my original question, which was actually about the tree removal. In what circumstances would the town not be the ones to remove its own trees if this proposal were to be agreed by council, as opposed to the pruning of the trees for site access?
Mayor Vernon, we would, I think the answer would be the same. Basically, we would look at whatever circumstances apply to the works that are being done and what would be the most appropriate way of addressing tree removal, whether the applicant does it at their cost to our satisfaction or the town does it at its town does it at the applicant's cost, one way or the other. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Follow-up question from this. Is it possible for those 4 trees to be removed and replanted elsewhere? Mr Denham?
Mayor Vernon, I think I would understand that question to mean to relocate those trees. I'd have to take that on notice. Thank you.
Thank you. Like to take that on notice. My next question is also based on the officer's report, which indicates that shrubs in the landscaping are to be removed. How many shrubs are proposed to be removed for the 85 square metre site? Mr Denham?
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. We do not have an exact number of shrubs proposed to be removed. However, it is clear that numerous shrubs will need to be removed. This has been noted in the heads of terms, and it's a detailed issue that will be resolved in the event that the transaction is approved. Thank you.
Thank you. My next question, paragraph 17 of the officer's report. Can you please explain what is meant by the words, inverted commas, without the usual break clause in favour of the town? Closed inverted commas. Mr Denham?
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. Policy 310, leasing and licensing, stipulates at paragraph 6H that leases granted by the town include a redevelopment clause, and that redevelopment clause would provide that if the town wishes to do anything that may result in significant redevelopment of the land and or the facility, the town may give 6 months written notice of termination of the lease, requiring the lessee to vacate on such termination. And paragraph 17 of the officer report is referring to a proposed 20-year lease without such a break/redevelopment clause. Thank you.
Thank you. Given the current uncertainty around the Lathlane Park Zone 1 redevelopment new football facility project, what are the options to extend the date of termination of the current telecommunications leases on the grandstand? Mr Denham?
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. Now, the current leases date back several decades and they have some fairly historic terms. The termination provisions are inflexible and don't reflect the sort of provisions we would put in a modern lease. If the termination notices that have been issued to the existing telco providers are withdrawn, then by way of an example, one of those leases would need 1 year's prior notice in the event that the town were to permit that tenant to occupy the premises after the 30th of June 2025. An alternative option would be to actually replace those current leases, which are historic and have very old and out-of-date provisions, with current leases, current leases to replace the leases that are subject to the notice of termination. So we would, under that option, we would proceed now or as soon as possible to grant fresh, short-term, month-to-month leases to the existing tenants, which would have a very clear right of termination for the town on a short-term basis, for example, on 1 month's notice. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there an option to defer consideration of this item until after the state and federal elections in 2025? Mr Denham?
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. So dealing firstly with the potential election dates. So the next WA state election is, I understand, expected to be held on Saturday, the 8th of March 2025, and the next federal election date is not known at this time, but is understood to be subject to requirements, which mean the latest that would be held would be on the 17th of May 2025. If this item is deferred until after those dates, this will create a lengthy period of uncertainty during which the applicant, Amplitel, might not wish to incur a lot of expenditure on planning to redevelop the new facility at the new location. So if consideration of this item is deferred until after the state and federal elections, then again, one option would be to proceed at this stage to grant fresh, short-term, month-to-month leases to the existing tenants to replace the old leases, with the town again having the right to terminate those leases on a short-term basis of, say, 1 month. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr Denham, and this is a question that I haven't given advance notice of, but noting your answers to my questions, what, in your opinion, is the likelihood of Amplitel being willing to enter into fresh short-term, say, monthly leases, given that they appear to have been quite content with their location on the top of the grandstand for many years as an optimal place for telecommunications towers within the Lathlane area? Mr Denham?
Thank you, Mevin. I think to clarify, my reference to fresh short-term leases would mean short-term leases on the roof of the existing grandstand. First of all, Amplitel is the tower infrastructure arm of Telstra. We would actually be dealing instead with Telstra and not Amplitel, a little bit of technicality. But given that Telstra have received a notice of termination, they wouldn't have much choice other than to either agree to whatever the town is willing to offer them, or alternatively to seek to continue telecommunication service by means of low-impact facilities. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions about this item? Councillor Hamer, you got in just seconds before Councillor Minson.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. Just following up on the officer's comments about a possible option which was mentioned in the report. Will that be possible to mention in the OCM as a option B, to have the month-by-month leases with the current holders of the infrastructure?
Mr Denham?
Yes.
All right. So that would be something that, when you say would that be possible to mention in the officer's report, that be something to be included in further consideration for the next report, Mr Denham? That be right? All right.
Yes, Madam.
Yep, thank you. Anything further, Councillor Hammer?
Yeah, my next question is about the confidential draft key terms. Do I ask that later in the meeting, or?
We will need to go into a confidential session if you want to ask questions about any of the confidential attachments, and I just make that note for all elected members, because we do have a number of confidential attachments to a number of different items. If you want to ask questions about the content of those documents, we will do that in a confidential session, yes.
Okay, and as we go, or altogether?
I think it'd be preferable if we just did one confidential session rather than break to have a confidential session, come back in and go to the next item and keep trying to do that. So
can I flag that then for that?
Yes,
period,
absolutely. Flag that, that we'll need to ask them confidential for that one. All right, that's fine. Did you have any other questions that you want to ask about this item?
Thanks.
All right, thank you. Councillor Minson.
Thank you, Matt. Just on the same topic of the proposal to have the short 1 month recurring leases, just to clarify that there hasn't been any discussions to date with the telco tenants regarding that option.
Mr Denham?
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. Correct, there has been no discussion with the telco tenants of a short-term option for them to remain on the roof of the existing grandstand or indeed anywhere else. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Minson. Any other questions about this item? No? All right, we will move on. 13.5, current works required for the Lathlane Park grandstand. Deputy Mayor Ife, understand you have some questions about this item.
Yes, I do have a question about this item. It was sent through yesterday, so hopefully that was sufficient notice. The recommendation lists transfers from the capital works budget, which amount to 3/5 of the amount budgeted for the car park gate and 2/3 of the amount budgeted for upgrades to the ground floor toilet. Can we get some commentary around what the reduced available funding would mean for these two projects? Specifically, could they still proceed but at a lower cost?
Direct that question to Mr Wong.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. So the impact would be that for the gate upgrade, we will have a cheaper solution, but it will still function as required. The other project, being the ground floor toilet upgrade, we are not likely to be able to have this project done this financial year, and we are looking at getting this project done next financial year, and therefore there's no impact to both projects. Thanks.
Thank you. So my understanding from that is that you could still proceed with the gate upgrade, but not with the toilet upgrade. Would there be any help then in removing the entire budget for the toilet upgrade, therefore leaving almost all of the budget available for the gate upgrade?
Mr. Wong, was that a question for Mr. Old? I think so, yes. He's ready. One of you needs to tell me who wants to answer it. It's not like a chocolate box surprise or anything. Mr. Old.
We could consolidate that into one budget. I recommended we do that because knowing that these projects are delayed and the ground floor toilet, we're looking to also potentially do the front counter at the same time, so minimise disruption. It will be put up for consideration in next year's budget. It is within the building capital works subset of work, and considering it is an admin building and albeit a community building, but not to some other degree, we thought it would have least impact on the community. So I haven't quite done the sums on what your recommendation would be, but that would be so 75 grand from the toilet. What is what you're suggesting, if I can ask that?
Well, yes, it occurred to me that if you're not going to proceed with the toilet, then you could use that 75,000 and then you only need to find 5,000 from elsewhere, which may mean that your car park gate can still be pretty snazzy.
I don't know that snazzy was the look we were going for, Deputy Mayor Ife. Functional maybe. Mr. Old?
I did consult with Mr. Wong and a couple of other people when we thought leaving a small amount in those budgets, if there's some preliminary design work or something that we need to do this year, might be better, or if there's some, I don't know, the toilet needs some urgent modifications or something this year, but by and large, let's just leave a little bit in case we need to.
Thank you, that makes more sense.
All right, thanks, Deputy Mayor Ife. Councillor Cruiser, had you down for some questions about this item?
My questions have already been answered, thank you.
Have they? Oh, all right.
It turns out that my questions were the same questions that Deputy Mayor Ife asked, so.
All right, thank you. Anybody else who's got questions about this item? In which case I did send through some questions about this item, but I did that relatively late this afternoon. So I'm just going to ask my questions now. My first question is the 2 pages of attachment 13.5.2, noting that it is a confidential document in terms of its contents, but my question is that the only report that the town has received from the identified consultant in the officer report SW19, or is there a bigger, broader report that's available? Mr. Wong?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. So those 2 pages are part of a much broader report, which was essentially done for the whole of town's building assets. Thank you.
I see. All right. So is that part of the building condition assessment report that relates to this facility available to elected members as a confidential attachment, not just the 2-page schedule? Mr. Wong?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, it is available, and we can provide that as a confidential.
All right, thank you. That would be good if that could be provided as a confidential item. Thank you. In paragraph 8 of the officer report, reference is made to the need for further investigation of the defects that are reported in confidential attachment 13.5.3. And there's a noting about a number of items. In the officer's report, it notes there are 5 items. What further investigation would be required to determine the priority rating and solutions for what is said to be those 5 items? Mr. Wong?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. So the further investigations include detailed structural design, So, for example, where we've got structural columns or beams or slabs that we need to have a proper solution in terms of making them safer. We do need a proper structural design, which would include, for example, reinforcement bars and the structural thickness of the structural member, and actually certification as well of the design. What we have now is a high level indicative explanation of what needs to be done without the details. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And my last couple of questions really relate to a part of the point raised by Deputy Mayor Ife. So just to be clear, what's being proposed in the officer recommendation, does that mean then that those two projects for the administration centre would not proceed in this financial year but would move through to the following financial year? Is that right? Or I'm still confused. Mr. Wong?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, mostly right. However, the gate project can still go ahead with a cheaper solution, and so we can still get it done this financial year. However, the second project, the ground floor toilet, will need to be done next financial year. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you. Noting the amount of money that's currently sitting in the Building Renewal Reserve Fund, is there not an option for these works, assuming council were prepared to approve them, to be done by a budget variation and the funding for them taken from the Building Renewal Fund, which currently in 14.2.1 has a $1.3 million current total sitting in it? Mr. Old?
Mayor, that is a possibility. That's just not my recommendation. My recommendation, we recycle an existing budget for a project that is unlikely to proceed to any great degree this year.
Okay, and when you say a project's unlikely to proceed to any degree this year, you're talking about the toilet upgrade on the ground floor?
Correct, yeah.
And so just a question, I know that we've obviously just completed works with regards to refurbishment of the ground floor here that included, for example, new carpeting, etc., etc. And if I'm not mistaken, understand that there's further work to be done that will see a refresh of the customer service front desk and the entrance area, because upgrades were done on the stairwell. Is that portion of works going to be done in the current financial year? And if so, does it not make more sense to get the toilet upgrade works done at the same time we do the rest of what's left of the ground floor downstairs in the public facing area? Because the toilets are public facilities too. Someone want to take that one on board? Mr. Wong?
Yeah, we both know the answers. Yeah. Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have looked at several options, and for us, like what Mr. O has confirmed just now, to minimize inconvenience and also to ensure we got the best contract outcome and cost effectiveness in project delivery, we are combining the customer service area with the ground floor toilet as one project to be delivered. Yeah. So both will be done next financial year based on this proposal. Thank you.
Right. So now I'm going to go back to reverse question then. Had it not been for this proposal with regards to the works upgrade at Lathlane Park, would the ground floor, customer service and toilets all have been done in this financial year? I'm going to go, Mr. Old, do you know the answer to that?
Highly unlikely. I don't think there's enough left for the customer service area with the security screens and stuff in the existing budget. So we would have either had to come back for more money or simply not do it.
Okay, all right. I've got that clear now. All right, thank you. Any other questions about this item? Deputy Mayor Ife.
Sorry, those questions have raised another question. On the car park gate question that we may still be able to proceed with this year, given the considerable reduction in the budget that we'd be looking at and therefore a considerably cheaper option, would that risk the gate needing to be attended to again in the short term? Would we end up with a less high quality outcome that may need to have further costs down the path?
Mr. Wong?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. The answer is no. The cheaper option will still provide the outcome required, but rather than working on the actual railing that's holding up the gate itself, we are actually working on the barrier system to still allow the function as planned, but it's much cheaper. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Ife. Feels like I just can't let this go. So, Mr. Old, then, given the Building Renewal Reserve Fund does have 1.3 million in it, is that a source of funding for the gate project for the admin building, so that we're not taking any money out of any budget that we've currently proposed for that project in order to fund this one at Lathlane? Or alternatively, could the money from the building renewal be allocated to the Lathlane Park structural works?
In theory, it could be. Given that this Lathlane is an emergency situation, or almost emergency situation, and that when we get to the mid-year budget review, we're potentially reallocating jobs that we're not going to do and things back and to and from reserves. I thought this in isolation would be a fairly quick solution, and then when we get to mid-year review, to and from those reserves for a relatively small amount, we could consider it then. Given the relatively low value, I know $80,000 is a lot, but it's also not in the context of our big budget, and we're simply not going to do the bulk of the ground floor. That was probably the easy pickings for me, to be honest. I don't always recommend touching reserves for nitpicking, nitpicking is the wrong word, just for little bites, because it just erodes the value of that reserve. And when you get to do or wish to do a big project in the future and you've squirreled it away 50k, 100k here or there, you kind of lost the value of that, the gravitas of that reserve, if that makes sense. I know that's outside of this immediate item, but that was my recommendation for doing these from these other projects.
All right, thank you. Any final questions about this item? No. All right, next item is 13.6, which is Claude Street, Burswood, request to advertise revised proposed closure of a portion of the road reserve. Councillor Councillor Minson, I understand you've got some questions on this item.
Thank you, Matt. Yep, I'll just ask a few of them for the record. So does the waste collection currently occur on lane 94 for the adjacent properties?
I'm going to direct that question to Mr. Denham.
Thank you, Matt. Yes.
Thank you. Could the waste be collected from the adjacent streets, Styles and Claude, I believe?
Mr. Denham.
Thank you. The town's waste trucks could be diverted to service from Claude Street and Styles Avenue instead of from right-of-way 94. This, however, may be impractical or unsafe to implement for reasons including the following. It may result in complaints from private property owners or occupiers because lane 94 forms a rear access lane to approximately 20 lots in Claude Street and Styles Avenue. The properties in Styles Avenue in particular appear, so far as we, from on the face of an opinion, they appear to be configured such that the servicing activities occur to the rear. So skip bins have been observed at the rear of these properties, and the customer-facing activities for these properties in Styles Street are at the front of the properties, which are quite attractive. And there's also the possibility that regardless of what the council's waste trucks may do in terms of diverting them to Claude Street or whatever, there may also be private refuse collection services or indeed other back-of-house services that may occur along lane 94 and may need a turnaround facility for safety reasons. Thank you.
Thank you. And just the final one. Is the advertisement of road closure, so I guess this juncture, the only practical or preferred hold point for the town's requests currently under Section 1A of the recommendation on the report?
Mr Denham?
Thank you, Mayor. I would say yes, noting that the applicant was requested to address a number of requirements of the town prior to this juncture and declined to do so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Minson, is that all of your questions?
That's all my questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Are there any other questions about this item? I will just ask a question which I think Councillor Minson did flag as potential for being asked, but noting that we had a deputation, if memory serves me correctly, from the planning proponents for this particular proposal, and we talked quite a bit about the interface with the principal shared path that runs along the entrance to the Graham Farmer Freeway, noting that now the revised proposal no longer includes the a construction of the section of the principal shared path that would be missing at lane 94, and that's now been taken out. Mr Denham, is there anything you can tell us about that, about what's happened to that?
Thank you, Mayor. So Main Roads have subsequently required that no development as a result of this proposal is to encroach into the PRR or Main Roads Reserve, and please see paragraph 6A of the report. Now, the applicant has, further to the feedback from Main Roads, deleted these works for the principal shared path from the applicant's revised proposal, which is now in front of you. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So I guess my final question is, I know that the officers are recommending that we proceed with this, but there was a lot of discussion at the time when we had the presentation about trying to create both some open space in that area and also some connectivity. But am I right in sensing that what's being proposed now in the revised proposal post the advertising of it, or rather subsequent to us considering putting this forward in a revised way, that we're getting a lesser outcome in terms of public open space and connectivity? Is that right, or are the officers still of the view that it's a good proposal? Mr Denham?
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. To the best of my recollection, the proposal that was approved by Council in March this year did not expressly provide for the applicant to provide additional open space. There may, however, have been, yes, that prior to that, when there was a presentation to Council by the applicant, or at some point, the applicant did signal that they would make public open space available, but I don't, to the best of my recollection, see it as having crystallised into the council approval in March this year.
All right, thank you. Any other questions about this item? Councillor Minson?
Yeah, just following up on the Main Roads condition, I guess with the latest one being not to construct any works in the reserve, or their reserve, and noting that their previous condition was to actually enforce the applicant to connect the PSP. Is there kind of any clarity out of Main Roads that when they are talking about the latest condition, that they're referring more to, I guess, buildings or things on the lot encroaching into the reserve? And I guess my question is leading to, if the applicant was proposing to construct the PSP with like landscaped shoulders in the reserve, would that be, is that the intention of Main Roads condition to not undertake those types of works?
Mr Denham?
Yeah, Thank you, Mayor. Main Roads did stipulate that there be no development within their primary regional road reservation. There was only one exception to that, which was that any proposed landscaping or revegetation within that road reserve requires Main Roads approval. So there was nothing about the PSP which previously had been a Main Roads requirement, and the applicant, on the basis of feedback from a meeting with Main Roads, seems to have designed this PSP out of the revised proposal. Thank you.
Would it be possible to, I guess, receive clarity on that? Because from my reading, it could be that they are referring to like buildings and awnings and things of that nature rather than the PSP. Or we're quite certain.
Mr. Denham?
Thank you, Mayor. We can certainly go back to Main Roads and ask the question. Thank you.
Councillor Minson, anything further?
No, thank you.
Any further questions about this item? No? All right. We will move on to item 13.7, Rutland Avenue, Lathlane, traffic calming. Councillor Cruiser, I have you down for questions for this item.
The discussion on this item refers to the Lathlane Local Area Traffic Management Pilot Study of 2015. In previous discussions, I had got the impression that the recommendations from the study were not in force or supported. Is that the case?
Mr. Lappin?
Thank you, Mayor. At the October 2018 Ordinary Council meeting, it was resolved to suspend traffic calming works on Egham Road following a petition signed by 64 residents. Additionally, it was requested that the local area traffic management plan be suspended, with future treatments to be reconsidered based on ongoing monitoring and further community engagement as deemed necessary. An evaluation was conducted in July 2019 to compare the 2014 LATM pilot study to the most recent crash data and vehicle volumes. The comparison outlined an 8% reduction in crashes pre and post treatment, with volumes increasing by over 700 vehicles per day on average. 85 percentile traffic speeds further reduced pre and post treatment by up to 4 kilometres an hour, down to an average of 49 kilometres an hour. And that's only on streets that were treated during the pilot study. The project was no longer supported based on the pending 2019 Orrong Road planning study. Project momentum was lost and the integrated transport strategy was being developed and moving towards individual skinny street treatments, not area-wide studies. The projects that were affected by the suspension were Cookham Road, Egham Road, Cornwall Street, Streetley Road, Staines Street, the intersection of Goddard Street, Saleham, McCartney Crescent, and Rutland Avenue, intersections of Gallipoli Street, Egham Road, Cookham Road, and Salem Street.
What are the potential implications of installing traffic calming for the construction of a separated cycle path in line with the previous council resolution, where we would retain both lines of Rutland Avenue?
Through the chair, these would be interim works, so anything that we put in now would be removed for the final delivery, whether that be a two-way as a preferred option.
So to clarify, if we put in speed humps now, once that two-way version, if that two-way version was completed after retaining 10 million plus, gaining $10 million plus in funding from the state government, we would then remove it?
Mr. Lappin?
Through the chair, that's correct. Any road widening under the two-way option would remove the traffic calming.
if the $10 million in plus in state government funding that's currently sought for the completion of the separated path on Rutland Avenue is not provided, and council should then resolve to pursue the one-way option for the completion of the PSP along Rutland Avenue, or if the state government resumed the road in order to complete the PSP, what would happen to any traffic calming measures that we install?
Mr. Lappin?
Through the chair, the two-way design actually reduces the road width down to 5.5 metres. So a further traffic analysis would have to be done whether it would be deemed necessary for traffic calming to go back in, or the other option would be to modify the traffic calming that would be installed.
Are there any other questions about this item? Councillor Hamer?
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. Just a general question about the distance between the proposed 7 locations. What is that kind of measurement roughly between those?
Mr. Lappin?
Through the chair, there was 5 locations that were deemed necessary of receiving traffic calming treatments. General rule is 100 metres between speed humps, but this can be rationalised based on the road environment.
So 100 metres was the preferred. So what are these locations based out from the map that we've received?
Mr. Lappin?
Through the chair, the original map that was developed back in, I believe it was May, was for every mid-block along that 900 metre section. The review that we've done identified 5 locations, so we've reduced that down to 6 sets of speed humps, noting that the one at Kitchener Pedestrian Bridge would be 2 sets on either approach.
So the measurement between those is what?
Mr. Lappin?
Through the chair, based over 900 metres, it's 5 different locations.
By my count, I've got...
I don't think Councillor Hamer's received an answer to his question. Mr. Lappin, is that one that we can take on notice and get that specifically? Because he wants to know the distance between each one.
Through the chair, they'll vary slightly, so it'll be just over 250 metres, give or take.
Councillor Hamer, does that assist?
It does. And so the 5 locations mentioned in the report are different to the map that we've received at 13.7.1, where there's 8 locations. Which would be a different measurement if that was to be used? Which would be what?
Mr. Lappin?
Through the chair, that's correct, because the locations that were deemed requiring the traffic calming some of them were down to key intersections. So the actual traffic calming would have to be on whichever approach would warrant it.
Councillor Hamer?
Never mind.
All right. Well, look, I will actually turn to the acting CEO because I know that he has some knowledge about this. Mr. Doy.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. What we'll do is, with the attachments that are related to this item, we'll just include a measurement that shows the distance between various calming measures, so it's really clear in the attachment for the OCM.
Will that assist, Councillor Hamer?
It would. And just on the number of proposed traffic calming, if the 85 percentile is 10 kilometres over the speed limit, how many of these interventions would be required to assist in getting that speed below the 50? I mean, is the 5, obviously the 5 locations have been earmarked, but on that stretch of road, what's the rationale for having so many in one area?
In a 900 metre corridor. Mr. Lappin?
Through the chair, I mean, that was based on the vehicle speeds at those approaches to the intersections. So we can rationalise the number down and focus on the ones, particularly Gallipoli Street and Rutland Ave, that was the highest volume over the 85th percentile.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hamer. Are there any other questions about this item? Councillor Cruiser and then Councillor Melrosa.
Under the potential risks for health and safety, we note 85% percentile speeds remain 10 kilometres per hour over. Could you speak a little bit more to the risks, or could somebody speak a little bit more to the risks that poses to health and safety? And would it also be possible to get a little bit more information about the risks of not intervening to our integrated transport strategy?
Mr. Laffin?
Through the chair, I think it was provided in previous council reports based on the traffic speeds over 50 kilometres an hour and how that mix of vehicle speeds with cyclists and the severity of the impact and what that would mean for a cyclist. So I think that was provided before, and we can definitely provide that as further information in the final report.
Councillor Cruiser, anything further?
If we don't intervene in traffic speeds on Rutland Avenue, what are some of the impacts on our integrated transport strategy and our ability to achieve our goals for that?
I might refer that to the acting CEO, Mr. Doy.
And thanks, Mayor Vernon. I might ask Councillor Cruiser to repeat the question so I could give you a decent answer, if that's okay.
What are the implications of not installing traffic calming not putting forward a motion to fund this traffic calming at the next OCM for our integrated transport strategy?
Mr. Doy?
Yeah, so the integrated transport strategy is obviously seeking to reach mode shift targets, and part of that is to get more people cycling. And if we have a environment on Rutland Avenue which is speedy, too speedy, that's certainly a detriment to people riding their bikes and feeling safe in that part. So if we have traffic calming devices which are slowing vehicles, you can see that there is a link there between a safer environment for cyclists going down Rutland in the interim, in its condition at the moment.
Anything further, Councillor Cruiser? Councillor Melrosa?
What is the desired speed that we want vehicles going down on Rutland Avenue?
Mr. Lappin?
Through the chair, if we were targeting a safe active street option, that would be 30 kilometres an hour. But the current speeds that are recorded down there are well in excess of 60 kilometres an hour. So 10 kilometres above the posted speed limit is an issue.
What is the current speed? I believe is 50. So is that the speed that we're wanting the vehicles to travel in its current design, with the speed bumps included?
Mr. Lappin?
Through the chair, 50 kilometres an hour is the posted speed limit. However, with the volume of cyclists that use the route and it deemed necessary for a principal shared path, it would be only sensible for the council to target that 30 kilometres an hour, and speed humps or speed cushions target that 20 to 30 kilometres an hour.
You're leading me into my next question. So what's the design speed of the particular options that are put before us? So what vehicle speed can the vehicle go over when it manoeuvres over this device?
Mr. Lappin?
Through the chair, the option 2, the one-way slow points, are down to 20 kilometres an hour, and the speed cushions are designed for vehicles to travel over them at 30 k's an hour. The recent ones that were installed along Archer Street have seen a reduction of speeds down towards that 32 to 34 kilometres an hour, just as an idea.
Councillor Melrosa, anything further? No. Anyone else who's got any questions? Councillor Devereux.
Thanks, Mevin. The report on page 63 says that there would be a space for cyclists to bypass with the humps. Where is that space for cyclists to bypass?
Mr. Lappin?
Through the chair, that's between the edge of the curbing and the speed hump at the moment. The design options include a 300 to 500 mil gap, not only for drainage but also for a cyclist to bypass.
Thank you. And one further question. Given we have a number of these humps in the town, I'm assuming the council hasn't had to vote on every single hump that we have in the town. So do we need to, as a council, vote on these humps, or could it be that with the budget review, if there's funds available, that the town itself could, as it does in other humps cases, put those in to address the safety issue that's been noted for over 10 years?
Mr. Lappin?
Through the chair, the only conflicting point is the current budget. We saw a similar outcome with Etwell Street recently, where there was budget available. It was deemed necessary, so Watts profile speed humps were installed. It was operational.
Councillor Devereux, anything further?
So just to confirm that, so council doesn't need to resolve for this budget if out of the budget review there were funds, the town could take an operational decision to make this street safer with those speed humps. Is that correct?
Mr. Lappin?
Through the chair, correct.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Devereux. Can I ask a question about option 2, which is the slow point? Noting that what was said about the potential slowing of the traffic, how much space do you need to create a full single lane slow point on Rutland Avenue? Like the distance from the start of setting it up to when it's finished. So if that makes it clear, I'm looking at the distance, and I note it's not said to be the preferred option, but what could that potentially look like? Mr. Lappin?
Through the chair, are we talking about just individual treatments, or are we talking about the route itself, how many would be installed?
Yeah, I guess it's probably that latter point, because with your map for option 1, it shows the clear markings of where the speed humps would be installed. It shows roughly what distance they are apart, although there's no key to indicate the spacing. And because of that, you get a feel for just how many would be installed over that roughly 900 metre stretch. If you were looking at the slow point option, how many of them would you need to install in this area, noting, as the officer report says, you can't use the slow point right next to the Kitchener Bridge, but you could use them in other locations in the 900 metre stretch. So you're able to give us an indication of how many you think would fit within the area to try and bring down the speeds?
Thank you, Mayor. Roughly there would be 3 locations that would be deemed viable. Now the treatment itself is about 90 metres in distance from Giveway to the other end of the treatment. So there would be 2 on the northern approach of Kitchener Bridge and 1 on the southern approach.
Thank you. And looking at the photograph that you've helpfully included in the officer report as an example, the one that shows David Street, given that Rutland Avenue is wider than that currently, would the slow point look somewhat similar with the construction of the little triangular curbs to bring the middle? And if that were the case, would there still be space on the railway line side, for example, for cyclists to be able to get through? Would it be able to be constructed to bring the traffic in but still allow potentially cyclists to go down one side? I assume most cyclists try to take the railway line side of Rutland Avenue at the moment, especially, well, when they're going into the city anyway. Mr. Lappin?
Through the chair, based on curb treatments either side of a cyclist trying to ride through there, there would be pedal impacts. So any cycle bypass would have to be constructed as a concrete footpath at grade with the verge.
Okay, thank you. So, noting what you said that there would be space to have 3 of them, have you given any consideration to a combination that would see a single point, slow point, and then some of the Watts speed humps? Because I'm just acutely aware of all of the feedback we've all received recently about the impact of speed humps and the noise on all of the houses that live right outside such bumps. It's been pretty significant down in Carlisle, so looking at how that could be potentially minimised but still achieve the safety and the reduction in speed. Mr. Lappin?
Thank you, Mayor. It would be reasonable to install the Watts profile speed humps at the Kitchener Bridge, and so have a hybrid option and include this one-way slow points at those 3 locations outside.
So apart from having the Watts speed humps either side of the Kitchener Bridge, if there were 2 slow points, where would roughly you think the slow points be on the map for the option 1, like roughly near what street intersections?
One would
Being
be
on the spot now, Mr. Lappin.
Thank you, Mayor. One would be south of the Salem Street intersection, and one would be north of, I think it's Enfield Street.
Thank you for that, because I'm looking at the map. What do you think would be the downside of that option, like the hybrid, versus what you're proposing with the 8 lots of speed humps?
Thank you, Mayor. The reason why we didn't propose option 2 as the preferred was so that we didn't muddy the waters in regards to that being a one-way slow point and us advocating for a 2-way road environment.
Okay, things to think about. Any other questions on this item? Councillor Cruiser?
Would we expect that installing one-way slow points would see the redirection of some car traffic through Lath Lane?
Mr. Lappin?
Through the chair, possibly, but only in peak times.
Anything further? Mr. Lappin, installation of 8 speed humps along Rutland Avenue. Do we think that will see the diversion of traffic moving through other associated streets?
Thank you, Mayor. Rationalised down to 5 locations.
All right, thank you. Any other questions about this item? Councillor Hamer.
Just historically, there seems to be more use of slow points in this area than speed bumps. Midgley and Costance, they've been there as long as I can remember. Would there be a preference to sort of maintain that sort of theme if it was able to do so on Rutland?
Mr. Lappin?
Through the chair. Slow points are definitely the preference in regards to noise generation. They'll still generate noise from vehicles slowing down and accelerating. It's much like the speed humps, but they don't have that impact noise. The downside to the one-way slow points is it forces, if it was that example that's shown on the screen there, it would force cyclists to share the road still with vehicles, although it being a slower environment.
Is that because of the width, but the cyclists are able to go on the outside of the other locations that are in Lath Lane? Is that on the map?
Mr. Lappin?
Yeah, through the chair, that current example that you see before you doesn't allow for cyclists to navigate between the curb build out and the edge curb. They would have to ride in the centre of the road with vehicles.
I Yes, I can see that, but the other examples that are in Lathlane currently, the cyclists can ride on the outside of the slow points.
Mr. Lappin, is that possible to create a slow point and have an actually through track for the cyclists? Like I think we have them on Bishopsgate Street, where the cyclists can go through and the cutout is small.
Through the chair, the current standards and with the road width don't allow for a compliant cycle navigation point through there, so it would have to be concrete and at grade with the verge.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any further questions about this item? Councillor Minson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to clarify one of the responses, so if council, the town wasn't kind of worried about the perception of installing these one-way give-way locations and worried that the perception would be that we were kind of in conflict with the previous recommendation for two-way, if that wasn't a concern, would the recommendation then be the one-way? That's one-way or a hybrid option?
Mr. Lappin.
Through the chair, that would definitely be the preference, having a hybrid option. That allows us to treat the Kitchener Bridge as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Minson. All right, there's no other questions on this item. Oh, Councillor Cruiser.
Would it be possible before the OCM to get a costing for the hybrid option?
I think Mr. Lappin's nodding yes, so yes, thank you. All right, we'll move on then to item 13.8, which is TVP 2426, which is the Edward Millen Park project tender. So I sent through a number of questions about this item, but some of those anyway, I wanted to raise. To go back to where I got. Yeah, so I sent through some questions earlier today, and they are, can there please be consideration of provision of the following information? Firstly, the current final detailed designs for the park upgrade used for the tender. Mr. Denham.
Thank you, Matt. The current final detailed design for the park upgrade is the same as the design approved by Council at the August 2023 OCM, with one modification requested by Mindera Advisory Group, which is A, inclusion of more soft earth paths through the urban ecozone, and B, the addition of a yarning circle. Thank you.
Okay, so sorry, I'm not necessarily understanding. So Council passed a resolution as to the design for the park, but you're saying there's been an amendment to that since? Not approved by Council, is that right?
That would appear to be correct, Mayor Vernon, yes.
Is there any reason why the design that was approved by Council has been adjusted but without Council approving it? Mr. Denham?
Can I take that on notice, please?
Yes, please. Are we able to get a list of the key features of the park's design? Mr.
The features include A, playground for abilities and with a neurologically diverse focus. B, spectrum shelter. C, amphitheatre seating and lighting. D, amenities building with a changing places. E, barbecue and picnic shelters. F, bike racks at key entry points. G, landscaping throughout, including all new turf. H, soft earth paths and yarning circle in urban ecosystem, which will be planted through UFS. I, concrete path network with DDA compliant grades. J, resurfacing of the asphalt heritage drive with OmniGrip surfacing to recreate the key heritage feature. K, irrigation including iron removal treatment to stop staining. And L, 31 car parks, car park bays and 3 Acrod bays. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Denham. I was trying to listen intently to all of those, and I think I've already forgotten one or two. But in terms of the amphitheatre area and the weather-protected cover to the performance space, that's still included as it was originally intended?
It says amphitheatre seating and lighting. So amphitheatre, yes. I'm just looking at the list here for covered area.
So this was what once might have been described as the gazebo, but then over time it was turned into something that would be weather-protected shelter for performers.
We have a spectrum shelter in the list. I can take that on notice.
All right, I think the spectrum shelter is it. So, yep.
Okay.
All right, thank you. My next question is, do we have clarification on the final number of trees that are proposed to be removed and a plan showing where they're located, their current condition, and then whether a reconsideration has been given in the time since the last council resolution to whether any of those trees could be saved from removal through the design process or the construction process? Mr. Denham?
Thank you. The number of trees to be removed are A, 28 trees, of which 2 are dead. 10 of these are required to build the car park and amenities building. 7 are directly in the footprint of the amphitheatre. 6 are in the urban eco-zoning area, of which 2 are dead trees being considered for habitat trees. Only non-local trees are being removed. 5 are in the footprint of the path, which could possibly be realigned, and further details being provided below. So the removals are only in areas which prevent construction of the approved features or are non-local or invasive species in the urban ecosystem. I've lost count of the questions. I'm not sure if I've answered all of them yet.
Thank you. I had asked the final number to be removed, which you said was 28, but 2 of the trees are already dead. So I suppose they would be going in any event, no matter what we did there, if they're already in situ but not living. You indicated 10 were going for the car park, 7 were in the way of the amphitheatre, and 5 were in the way of the pathways, but they were possible, could be reconsidered. And then I might have lost you, but that's sort of getting close to the number that you mentioned. So thank you. I really did want to find out whether the town has been actively considering just how many of those trees needed to be removed, given that, for example, we've just put out to advertise a policy about tree retention for non-residential developments. This is a non-residential development, albeit it's one of the towns. We've talked about things like trees in car parks because they create shade, and now we're looking at taking 10 trees out of an area designed for a car park. So that suggests we can't design the car park around the trees. And 5 are in the way of what we want to be the accessible pathways, but is there some clever design that would allow the pathways to move through the trees rather than the trees have to move for the concrete? So I guess I'm only wanting to know if we're actively trying to look at how we can do this, like right down to the wire to satisfy ourselves. We've done everything we can to keep as many trees there as we can. Mr. Denham?
Thank you, Matt. So of the 5 trees to be removed, 5 are in the footprint of the path, which could possibly be realigned, and we have some additional information which we can provide through additional consideration in the report. Thank you.
That would be great, thank you. So we take that part on notice. And I think the final part of the question that I had sent through was an outline of any features of the park upgrade that have been changed or differ from the original concept design approved by council. And I think you've indicated that there is two, and they relate to the softer paths and the yarning circle. That's one that appears to be different from, but are there any other features that have been changed? As in what we were proposing to do, we've actually changed either the way we're going to do it or how we're going to do it, for want of a better word.
Thank you, Chair. We have some additional information which is a summary of amendments made to the original concept design, and officers did seek tenders on the council-approved detailed design from August 2023, but we've got this additional information. We'll put it in the additional consideration part of the report.
All right, thank you. That would be helpful. And if there's a lot of it, could I request that it be distilled into some kind of neat table so we can sort of see like where the changes are? Because I know when the resolution was passed by council previously about the cost of this project, there were a number of options presented at different price points that had different features included, and ones that we would lose if we reduced the budget and ones that we could include if we increased the budget, and eventually council settled on the $7.5 million one. And I think at that stage we were hoping that we would get the separate funding for the Changing Places facility, which I now understand is part of the, I think, is that part of the Lottery West grant, or is it some standalone funding for the Changing Places? Mr Denham?
Thank you, Chair. We do have a table ready and waiting to put in the report. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Thank you for that. And in relation to the other questions that I sent through that I think some answers might be available to, but I haven't really had much of a chance to look at them. This is about trying to understand the figures that appear for the costing of this on pages 73 to 74, and it might just be me was missing something when I was reading through it, but I was trying to effectively work out that from pages 73 to 74, firstly, how did the figures on page 73 go from a total approved budget of 7.362 million to a total project of 8.9 million, inclusive of what's said to be a 10% contingency? Mr Denham?
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. We can provide a package of information on these questions, but in the meantime I can seek to go through them based on information already to hand. So dealing with your first question, the figure of 7.362 million is currently available and approved funds. An additional amount is in the Edward Millen Reserve, but requires a resolution to access this, as only the 1.862 million was in the 2024-2025 annual budget, and there is 2.16 million in the reserve. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a reference at page 73 to costs, including client costs, that lead to the 8.1 million. So what are the costs including client costs? Is the client us, or is that someone else? Mr Denham?
Thank you. So the build-up of the costs are tender, 7.84 million with no contingency, and client costs 0.26 million, and these are hassle to make sure it's built as per the design and contract management support. And contingency of 10% isn't included in the client cost, but would equate to a further 0.81 million on top, which then gets you to the full cost of 8.91 million. Thank you.
Thank you. My next question is, why is it suggested that the $2.2 million proposed loan from the WA Treasury Corp should stay included in these figures described as a 10% contingency, when there's already a contingency of 10%, which you've identified is $810,000 as part of the client costs? Mr Denham?
Thank you. The intent is not to draw down on the loan if it is not needed, and given it is an endorsed loan via the annual budget process, there is no need to disendorse. There is no compulsion to draw down the full amount, only draw down any funds as required. It is recommended to keep in place in the event of needing a part. Thank you.
I certainly understand that part, that if we don't need it, then we don't need to action it or utilise it or draw down on it. But it said in the report that the $2.2 million loan should still be a part of it and be considered as the 10% contingency. So firstly, $2.2 million is well more than a 10% contingency on the costings you've identified so far. And secondly, why would we call it a potential 10% contingency when the figures at page 73 already put in a 10% contingency at $810,000? Mr. Denham?
Thank you, Mayor. Perhaps if we could take that on notice, please.
Yep, that's fine. Happy to take that on notice. And then obviously when we get to page 74, it indicates that the proposed budget for this project is now $10.4 million, which is almost 33% higher than the approved budget of $7.5 million exclusive of GST, and well more than the recommended tenderer's price for the entire project of $7.8 million exclusive of GST. Mr. Denham?
Thank you, Matt. The total budget being proposed is $8.91 million, including the additional contingency of 10% and client costs. The overall municipal funding does not exceed the original approved budget of $7.5 million through the additional external funding received through Lottery West and the archive site POS contribution. And as I've said, a more detailed section on all of this information can be provided as additional information for the final paper to assist all elected members.
All right, thank you. That will be very helpful. Are there any other questions on this item? No? All right, then in that case, we have reached the end of the items that we indicated we needed to deal with. However, we have had a request to discuss one of the items for which there's a confidential attachment. So moving on to the remainder of the agenda before we get to confidential items. Item 16, motion of which previous notice has been given, there are none. Item 17 is public participation time, which I open at 8:33 p.m, and noting there being no members of the public in the gallery, I close at 8:33 p.m. Item 18, questions from members without notice on general matters. Are there any? No. See no questions on general notice matters. Item 19 is confidential matters. So we do have one item at the moment that we will be seeking to ask some questions on the confidential attachments. So I'll move a procedural motion that we close the meeting to the public at 8:34 p.m. To discuss a confidential item. Seconded, Deputy Mayor Ife, thank you. Is there any dissent? No, there being no dissent, declare that carried. So we'll now close the item to the members of the public. All right, it's 8:36 p.m. and we are reopened to the public. Our confidential session is completed. There being no further business of the Agenda Briefing Forum at 8:37 p.m, I declare it closed. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight, including those who joined on live streaming. Good evening.